welcome to the second event that Uma and Bankless have held together between our two communities. The first call was absolutely great. It was really good to hear from Bankless and to hear from the Bankless community. And I've certainly got a good few questions that I'd like to find out more about the Bankless community. And following up from the previous call, but also some of the events that have happened in the previous week. It's been quite an eventful week for the UMA protocol, and I think it's kind of raised some interesting issues around the whole of the interface between DeFi and traditional finance, how things are funded, how treasuries are managed, how the relationship between communities, teams, investors. So a lot of things that have been bubbling under the surface have perhaps become a little more open over the last week or so. And this is a great time to have this call.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe what we'll do is, I believe Surf said that the POAP is good to go. And if you want to kick it off and ask your questions, that would be a great place to start. And then we can turn it over. We can spend about a half hour on the UMA questions, and then we can turn it over to Bankless and address some of their questions. I think that would be cool.
Excellent. One of the first, after the last call, I kind of went and had a bit of a dig around the Bankless wiki, and I saw quite an amazing little hive of activity. And I know that Bankless kind of started out as a media enterprise that was quite centralised, but somehow you've managed to create this wonderful structure just from the community that you built around the media. What would be the advice from Bankless for somebody trying to build that kind of strong community?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I wish there was like a really easy answer for it, but I guess to give like some background, like kind of what we did over the past like few years is like Ryan and David obviously have like a good influence in the Ethereum community. We produce like a lot of content, and one of those things that we did was we created like this Discord channel pre-Bankless DAO, where all these like-minded individuals could kind of come together, and I think that was like really the basis is like that pre-DAO Discord channel that we had. I think like a lot of the culture and community was like kind of built there over like a year or two. I think like from our perspective, it was a very like slow kind of iterative process, and I think on the DAO front, like really what happened is like you give people an economic incentive to like really participate. And I think that kind of just supercharged the whole community that we had. So like pre-DAO, we had like 2,000, 3,000 people in our Discord, and we effectively all gave them like an economic incentive to align around this core mission. And to be honest, like I didn't expect the level of engagement that we ended up getting. Like the Notion page like that we have that wiki that you saw, I had nothing to do with it. The LLC had nothing to do with it. That was just like completely organic. So I think it was just like a really interesting testament to like we had this like pre-built community already there, and then we kind of just supercharged them with some sort of like economic incentive or tokenized incentive to align around, and the rest kind of just took care of itself. And it's been a very really interesting process, like an emergent process to like watch, just from like the outside, just all the activity that people have kind of built. In terms of like advice, I think it's like really just aligning around the core mission. To be honest, like I think everyone in the DAO is like very crypto native, like wants to see crypto be adopted, and like that was kind of the mission is like how do we push forward the adoption of crypto. And I think like a lot of people could have like resonated and could align around that. So I think if there's one thing, it's like token incentives plus like a really clear core mission that everyone in the community can align around.
I can touch briefly on the parts that you weren't able to, specifically the Notion and the wiki. That was a great job, Lucas. Thanks. Love learning about the history, about how we came to be. The wiki was born basically out of pure chaos. Everything was just kind of dropped in our lap, and we were told to go have fun. And we found out that there were a lot of ideas that were overlapping, a lot of duplicate projects in terms of onboarding. Like nobody knew which way was up or down. Workflows weren't overly streamlined, and there was a lot of contention. I mean, you drop 5,000 plus people into a server together and tell us to have fun. There was a major need to solve the different coordination layers. How can we streamline things so that people can seamlessly come in and out? Because I think a lot of us in the DAO space specifically, we have several or dozens of different projects on the go at once through various organizations. So being able to seamlessly jump in, picture where things are, have that little mental snapshot to know where to just plug in and jump out within the time constraints that we have, juggling all of our different commitments, was key. So it really came down to what is our culture, what is our mission, vision, values, how are we going to rally and align people around that? And then from there, it came down to how can we decentralize this, take the authority out of it, and create some sort of a streamlined system that's just plug and play. It doesn't matter how much experience you have, your background, or where you come from. You can just jump in and out of things as quickly as easily as possible. And that's really where the wiki came about and the different processes we do there.
Yeah, it also like disclose like there's still like a lot of chaos. Like it is like going to that
Yeah.
Discord is like drinking out of a fire hose. It is a lot, and like that's something that we're personally like trying to figure out. I think the Notion was like one of the big major steps towards like just syncing up on all the information and all like the activities. But I think general coordination on like all the activities that are going on in the DAO is like still something that we're trying to figure out on how to like optimize.
Really good advice there. Yeah, I entirely know what you mean about the chaos in the Discord. It's something that we experience quite a lot. We have the Superhumans that are kind of the community wing of the UMA protocol. And sometimes it feels like we're trying to solve the human coordination problem in real time. So we launched the UDAO incentives program quite recently, where it expires at a higher rate depending on the number of integrations that we get with other protocols, as a way of trying to get our community kind of focused on supporting the protocol and us both achieving our aims. And we want to UMA in the hands of people that believe in UMA, and our community is great for that. But it's pulling it together is quite difficult when there is so much activity going on and so many people eager to contribute. Have you had any problems with burnout?
That is a major problem. We're definitely seeing people burning out, and we're definitely seeing like core contributors dropping out from being overextended. To solve that, I mean, I make jokes all the time about docking people points for not taking care of their health. There's actually no point system. It's just me being a typical coach poking fun at everybody. The only one thing that I'm testing, at least in business development, is I'm probably going to start in that guild anyways. I'm going to test something about where you're limited on how many projects you can take on. So maybe you can only be a part of like 2 or 3 guilds or something like that. Just different structures on what we can do. Like, I get it, I love it, I'm not complaining. Everybody's passionate and everybody wants to contribute, but when you stretch yourself to the point of you're giving 2% on everything, you're not getting everything done. So I'm trying to test it out, at least in biz dev, of getting people focused and limiting their commitments so that they can show up on their AAA game, hammer stuff out as productive as possible in as short as time possible so that they can move on to other commitments. there's really been no way of really trying to. There's really been no way of officially canceling out the burnout.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think people are just like really excited, and it's also important to like recognize that most of the DAO members also just have like full-time jobs. So like burnout is definitely an issue in some cases, but I think generally it's really interesting to see like just lost my train of thought there. What was I going to say?
I think the thing is that DeFi in general can
Mhm.
be engaging. It draws people in. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think yeah, I think it's just really interesting. Like we had a core contributor that had to drop out a few weeks ago, and it's just really interesting to see like everyone will step up and kind of fill that role. I think the really nice thing about DAOs is that it's super flexible on your workload and like what you want to do. Obviously, like we want people to be working or like contributing as much as you can, but at the end of the day, like if you need to take a day off or a week off or a month off, or if you only want to do an hour or two one day and 5 or 6 the next, the DAO model is really flexible in that sense, where it's ultimately it's up to you on how much you want to contribute. With that said, like obviously some of the contributors have like some sort of obligations. Like the Writers Guild has to produce that newsletter every week that you guys sponsor. So if you're like kind of feeling burnt out, I think at the end of the day, it just like comes down to communication. Be like, hey guys, like I'm really not feeling well. Kind of need to take Friday off. Not sure if I'll be able to get to the newsletter today. And generally, like our community's been really supportive around that, around like mental health and like physical health and all that. So people will step up and like fill that gap, which is just like really nice. But I think like the DAO model is ultimately like super flexible in like your work and kind of how you're feeling. I think at the end of the day, if you have like obligations for the DAO, it's just being communicated with the other DAO members, and usually people are like very receptive of that, and are willing to help out.
Yeah, thanks for that. Because it is something that kind of concerns us. DeFi can be really engaging, and it's quite exciting what's happening all the time. But we want to build long-term relationships with our community, and we don't want to cause them any additional stress. So the flexibility is great, but yeah, it isn't that people kind of do consider their own responsibilities and in other aspects with their job and their families and all that kind of thing. So yeah, we're going to do our best to try and support people as we go through this process, because obviously getting these integrations is important, but not at the expense of our community members.
I want to chime in that like we've seen people like In a Little While is a good example, who's on the stage right now. Like you can also just kind of start and stop pretty easily. I think there's a sense of missing out on stuff or not knowing what's going on when you come back. But I would encourage people to sort of just allow that sense to not like basically just to tolerate the fact that you feel a little bit behind for a little while, but don't let that be a reason that you either don't take a break when you need it for mental health, or that you don't come back because you feel like you've missed out too much. Just like allow yourself to come in and out a little bit. It's perfectly effective to do that.
Yeah, totally. I actually would like to chew on that, like the fact that season 1 has been an incredible journey in terms of organization, and mostly stress comes out of either spreading yourself too thin, or either not really finding where you can fit in. And I feel like the whole community has like put in a lot of effort to smoothen out the onboarding process for new members, and that's still an ongoing challenge. But I think it has improved. The fact that the Notion is so much more structured than in the beginning, it's easier for people to find their sweet spot. If I can speak in terms of burnout, I think it was really amazing when there were a few people out of this huge community that were having some mental issues in terms of burnout. It didn't take us so long to form a group and be like 20 people in a room with actual mental health specialists supporting those people. So I found that really fascinating. I mean, we're all degens, we're all into this space, we're all overexcited and overstimulated. But when someone had a really rough patch, the whole community came together as one tribe to support those people. So I found that really, really fascinating. I think we're now in a stage where the biggest hurdle or the biggest like challenge is finding balance in terms of burnout. Mostly for me, for example, most of my stress comes out of not exactly knowing on who is full-time commit, who is half-time commit, and who is actually doing like pushing a lot of time after hours. And that's I'm finding that out through like individual voice calls with team members. But I think that's a way to improve. If you're such a big group and you're managing a project and there's 5-6 contributors and you're counting on them, and then there's actually 2 of them that dropped out and didn't like delegate their role, that's where some of the stress can come from, because the whole group depends on the entire squad to ship a product. And so for me, one of the things that I now find in like my first experience in a bigger DAO, I've been like in DAOs for a couple of years, but this is the first time at this size, this and also this kind of energy and this kind of level of contribution. So I'm wondering how you guys at UMA are subdividing contributions in terms of like, okay, these are people who are like full-time commit. These are people who are doing like half-time, like more freelance contributions, and this is our squad that is doing like after hours contributions. How are you guys dealing with that?
I wonder if one of the superhumans would like to take that question.
Yeah, just raise your hand if you're in the audience and you want to answer that question.
I mean, in some way you can solve it just through Discord, like a specific role or maybe some. I mean, there's so many ways to do it, but it can be like also like almost downgrading some kind of people's status by saying, okay, this is after, like just the words that I use, like after hours. It's not really respectful. Almost, it's like if for project management, like to ship a more complex product within the DAO. Yeah, there is a real need to find the people that can continue working on it. So yeah, I'm really keen to hear how you guys deal with that.
Well, the way that we've set it up in the first place, in the first
Can
instance.
you guys hear me?
Oh, excellent. Go ahead, Fruity Cup.
Okay. Just to chime in on that real quick. So, we just started roles recently. We have a few people working really hard on that, and it just came out like I would say today or sometime this last week. And basically, like, I don't want to say this is a job, because to me, like, I was here before like roles and like some type of system, like an official system we have now. But what's cool about the system is as long as you're actually contributing something, and all you have to do is propose like some type of role that you're looking for, and then we get to like either you can nominate yourself to take that role or someone else can do it. And it's all based off of like how much time you have to put into it, right? Because we have multiple different ways to contribute, where like you can do very simple stuff that maybe it only takes a few hours of a week to do, and that would count as like L1, or I guess level 1, and then that determines your payment. Or you can be in more of like a managerial position and really contribute, like, I don't know, like, let's say 20 hours a week or more or something like that. And you get paid for that work you do as well. So I think the incentives that we have now are really awesome. And I think it's more aligned with, hey, like, you're a community member, we honor you. It's not like some official thing, but at least like we acknowledge it, and here's some extra tokens for the work kind of thing. And I think it's been a good system so far.
Where Uma came in, like in this exact like discussion, is where in some way you want to. I found that maybe there's 3 layers of contributions. There's time contribution. So as you say, Fruity, it's like it's all about the people that show up, that do whatever they can to contribute time, wisdom, insights, good vibes, design, code, content, all of that. And then there's a layer where I think you want to also find ways to measure impact, which is super difficult, and which is why a couple of years I was really fascinated by what SourceCred tried to accomplish by like measuring impact in code, and also a little bit on Discord. And I think that the suggestions that have been like made by Yuma in terms of using your infrastructure to explore that's all. That's basically why I got really interested about Uma. So also keen to hear out of the blue, like what you guys feel are good metrics for doing that, or are there other DAOs that have been used that as like an extra incentive layer?
For the for the overall UDAO program, we have a very clear metric, which is the number of integrations with a bonus factor of integrations over 5 million. So the tokens that you have expire, or the UDAO tokens that you have expire to more UMA, the more integrations that we get. At an individual level, we're asking people to self-assess their performance on a 1 to 4 scale. So that, just for being there, that's good enough for a 1, and you will receive some UDAO just for minimal tasks and being a part of the community. And then if you feel that your performance was outstanding, you can award yourself a 4. And we haven't tested it yet, so we don't know how it will work. But I think that community members have enough respect for other community members to be able to assess their performance themselves. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Have you guys explored Coordinate at all?
Coordinate.
Yeah, Coordinate. So it's out of the Yearn ecosystem, and we actually did a round of this. I think this would actually be really useful for you guys. It's very similar to like that system that you just mentioned, but essentially what it is that you can onboard like all of your community members into this platform, and everyone gets 100 give tokens, right? And what you can do is that you can actually allocate those give tokens to your peers. Right? So like you can't keep them yourself, but you actually give them to your peers that you think have like contributed the most. And at the end of the round, there's a pool of tokens. Let's say those UDAO tokens are distributed pro rata based on the amount of give tokens that you received from your peers. And we did this. We actually facilitated, I think, the largest Coordinate round with like over 250 participants. And surprisingly, like literally the distribution, I think, was like really accurate in like the amount of contributions that people were making. So I would like look into that if you guys are interested in like figuring out ways to like incentivize and reward your community members for contributing. We just had a lot of success with it, and we're definitely going to plan on using it more in the future. So I'm happy to like also connect you guys to to the coordinate people as well, if you guys are interested.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, actually. It sounds really good, and I'd really like to take you up on that. We're interested in following up on any of these kind of things that we could do. All that we really need is something that is kind of administratively manageable and as fair as we can make it.
Yeah, Coordinape has actually a really incredible UI, especially like after the fact, you see a social graph that is really fascinating to watch it. Like the thing I mentioned where UMA can like maybe provide potentially like a third layer of sophistication in terms of rewards where like time contribution, POAPs, I see that as like a base layer and like Coordinate that Lucas mentioned and that I also personally like as a system and that is still really evolving. I've been hearing some really exciting stuff about the things that they want to deploy in the V2. I think that's like a second layer. I call that the social layer. And I was really keen to hear about like our third layer, potentially with UMA, like more based on measurable KPIs.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah, I will. I'll connect you with you after this call. With the coordinate people. I think they're on Telegram, so I'll DM you here, and then we can make that connection.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Really appreciate it, and I'll look forward to talking to them.
And not as off topic as it sounds, but I think that's what I've seen happening in the space the past months. This is exactly what's happening here. Like UMA helping Bankless, Bankless helping UMA with insights, with brainstorming. Personally, for me, this is the most exciting part of being part of DAOs is that inter-collaboration mindset. That's so awesome to see, guys. Really, that is super inspiring. That is everything what I love about the space. And yeah, this was just like another moment of exactly that. So just wanted to add that.
I'll jump in really quick because there's a lot of everybody wants a POAP code again.
And you should definitely go and claim it. Surf Tranquil creates absolutely amazing POAPs for us. It's so good.
Yeah, they're really incredible.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm Angus from the Bankless. So thank you guys for inviting us over to the UMA, which is like a great protocol. And the POAP is like the best I've seen in the industry. So it's really incredible. And I've been on like many servers. So thank you so much. Yeah. I wanted to say like, on the UMA channels, like the Discord looks so much more calmer and tamer compared to what we have on our side, which is like we have 100 over channels, which is like almost insane. So when I first joined, I had to like sort of mute every single channel so that I can have some sanity. And I just committed myself to joining the education guild. So something interesting I find on the Bankless side is we have these guilds. So guilds is like really calming, kind of stabilizing way of organizing people. And then every week we'll just gather around and we'll chit chat about to focus on a few projects. And I find that really very, very helpful. Because there are probably at least 20 to 30 projects running in Bankless right now. And there's just no way we can keep up with everything. But for us to come back on the same page every week, we'll try to attend the community calls, which are absolutely insane as well, because like in a week they do so much. Like every single guild is like running like a bullet train. Yeah, so that's just something I've seen in Bankless.
Cool. Some really, really good advice there. And thank you ever so much for introducing me to Coordinate. That's brilliant. The second question that I kind of had for Bankless. Does anybody else want to ask questions before I just spend my time picking their brains.
All ears.
Okay, I'll go. Well, one of the things that occurred to me is that, over the last couple of weeks, there seems to, from my perspective, there seems to be a sense that the accepted ways of doing finance in a larger scale have shifted a little. And I'd like to think that Uma was a big part of that conversation, where, the kind of traditional contracts, traditional investors, the traditional deals that get done between founders and investment capitalist firms are starting to break down. And you saw that with sushi and how engaged the sushi community has been in the Phantom Troop, I think it's called, Phantom Troop raise. I just wondered, because Bankless has much more of a kind of bird's eye view of the space. And I wasn't very sure whether this was a conversation that was kind of ongoing, and I just kind of hit it because Uma is so involved in the sushi conversation, or whether this is actually a sea change that has just happened in the last few weeks. Or maybe there isn't actually a change and I'm just imagining it.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of missed the second half of that question. Could you restate that?
It was just that over the last few weeks, I've kind of noticed that there's been a bit of a shift in the thinking, more community involvement in things like deals and founders and strategic investors. Traditionally, those would be, deals would be done primarily between the founders and venture capitalist firms. But with the Phantom raise, you've seen the community want to get much more involved in setting the terms and the conditions and the distribution schedules and the expiry. And I wondered if that was something that had been going on for a while and I just hadn't noticed, or if there is a definite, wind at the minute in that direction. And Bankless has a much more bird's eye view of the whole arena.
Yeah, we actually have a piece on this coming out like on the Bankless newsletter in a few weeks from the Tracer DAO people who did like a very similar thing. The sushi thing I think is like one of the more interesting ones as to like how involved they've been, and like I think they've always been more like anti-VC, which is why like the community came in so like passionate about like what was going on with that raise. But we have seen like some DAO treasury diversifications, like Friends with Benefits, which is a community that we're like pretty close with, did one a few months ago. Tracer DAO is another one. They have happened. I think the sushi one is probably the first one where it's like was very community oriented, or like very community grassroots, like whoa, like what are these terms being set? So I think that was really interesting, and I definitely see your point. Like I don't think that was happening before with other DAO raises. I think it was like more of the core teams kind of aligning, or like doing like the biz dev for that. Yeah, like Index Co-op did one too a few weeks ago. But yeah, the sushi one was really interesting just to see like how the community responded to it and like wanted stricter terms for the investors. And I think that's going to be something like DAO treasury diversification, which is obviously like a big thing for UMA and like what you guys are building with like the range tokens, is such an interesting like unexplored area that I don't think there is a best practice yet, and I think we're all kind of like learning as we go right now. But I think it is really interesting to see like the communities getting more involved with the investors and like setting the terms, because at the end of the day, it's the community is the largest shareholder or stakeholder in the protocol. So yeah, I see what you're saying. It's really interesting to see this unfold, but I don't think there are like best practices yet that have emerged, and we're kind of all like figuring it out as we go.
Thanks, Lucas, for that. I wanted to ask kind of like what's Bankless DAO's relationship to I guess A, like your own treasury, and then B, just this topic of treasury diversification. Is it something that kind of falls in Bankless DAO's wheelhouse and something you guys imagine like getting in conversations with other DAOs or sort of playing a part in this particular activity that's happening in the space?
Yeah, I think treasury diversification right now is like pretty important for us. Like I think it's something that we want to explore. The range tokens is something that personally is really interesting for me, and I would love to see if we could apply that for Bankless DAO, assuming like the sentiment is there. Otherwise, like we've also gotten like a good amount of interest from like DAO to DAO like token swaps. I know like a handful of communities have like reached out to like me or like Ryan or like some of the LLC people kind of interested in doing that. We actually really haven't seen many token swap like DAO to DAO token swaps happen yet. So I think that's like another interesting like treasury diversification thing and like an interesting way to like align two different communities. But yeah, I think like treasury diversification for Bankless DAO is definitely on the table. I don't think we're at the point where we would want investors. I think like from my perspective, the range tokens and like taking on like that, I guess, debt is more interesting from my perspective rather than like trying to get investors on board right now. But yeah, I think generally like in favor of treasury diversification. I think like we're trying to figure out like what the best way to go about it is.
Yeah, that's cool. The DAO to DAO swaps also interests me. I mean, the market is so correlated that sometimes it doesn't seem like it's much of a diversification. Like obviously it is in terms of like an upward market, but if everything kind of trends downward, then it's not like fairly helpful. That being said, like it's cool, and I do like the idea of these aligned interests, and it's something. Yeah, I was reading about Llama DAO facilitated one, but I forget the DAOs that actually swapped. But yeah, I think there's a lot of space for that that to be happening, and it would be cool for Uma to do something like that. I don't think we've seriously like debated a proposal along those lines or anything.
Yeah, even like how that process happens through like two decentralized governance, like I don't actually know what that process looks like. So I'd be interested. You said the Llama guys have done one of these?
Llama DAO, I was just reading about them this morning. Maybe Chandler knows even. They facilitated one, I think, because they do treasury management strategy for other DAOs.
Yeah, hi guys. I don't know the exact teams that they did the swap for, but I was actually kind of interested in the idea of using the range token as an actual payout structure for teams to create tokens that you can swap with the other team, right? One of the biggest problems I see is that teams commit to a vesting schedule and a release schedule for their tokens, but they also want to use some of those tokens to get maybe some partners. Like, let's say, for example, like at the end of this call, like both Uma and Bankless decide, all right, we'll swap a bunch of tokens from our treasury with a bunch of tokens in your treasury, and like that's a really cool incentive mechanism for us to work together. It's probably not going to happen if we had to do like a raw naked token for token swap, because that will be like contravention of like some teams like vesting schedules or something like that. But if you can swap a range token and do the same thing, that has like some sort of payout structure, that makes it a little bit more interesting, because like you can then have a range token or success token, like depending on whatever like payout structure you want to do. It can make the discussion between DAOs and like specifically partner DAOs that have like aligned incentives and use cases that make like a partnership a lot more like beneficial. Using those kinds of trading mechanisms between DAOs might actually like I at least foresee a path for anyone to kind of go down that route. And I'd personally just like, because I'm vested in the idea of range tokens, want to at least try that with one or two DAOs.
Yeah, the range token swaps are interesting. I didn't even think about that. Do you actually mind like talking a little bit about the range token and how it works and just giving some background on it for some of the people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, sure. I'll try my best to make it as kind of intro level as I can. But if you had to think of like a balance sheet of, you know, you've got X amount of tokens and those tokens trade at a specific price today, you've got $1 billion balance sheet, for example. Like something big teams like Sushi and Uniswap kind of have these really big DAOs. But because they can't really sell those tokens or kind of just give them out willy-nilly, they've got to find ways to kind of raise capital because developers need to be paid. They need to buy other teams. They need to give out grants. The DAO needs to function, and some of those functions have like an economic cost behind them. So for whatever the DAO's reasons are, they need to raise capital. And so the range token comes in as a potential solution to allow a DAO to lock up some of that balance sheet into this contract and mint on the other side something that's called a range token. The components of the range token might be a bit complex for like an entry level person who's never understood like options markets, but basically what the range token is a vested interest in having the project succeed, right? So if the project succeeds, the owner of the range token has upside potential and earns a guaranteed yield, or not necessarily a guaranteed yield, but just like a, you know, kind of predictable yield based off the payout structure. And on the other side, the DAO, if it succeeds, has reduced sell pressure on their token because they're not actually converting a lot of those tokens at the time of when the range tokens expire. And if you think about it, like very basically, it's like a debt instrument where I promise to pay back the amount of money I raised at a future date, and the terms of that depend on the success of the token. The success of the price of the token. And on the flip side, and I think this is the important part and why it's attractive for DAOs, is that built into the range token is some version of like downside protection. So, you know, in the blue sky scenario, the DAO and the investor are both winning, but in the downside protection level, there is some sort of protection for DAOs when token prices drop. I hope that kind of gives a very entry-level overview of how a range token works.
Mm-hmm. I guess
It
yeah.
somehow reminds me of a safe contract, right? In startups.
So I didn't quite catch that. Mind asking that one more time?
It reminds me of like a safe contract with startups.
Yeah, it's a little bit similar to that. Of course, it's a DeFi native contract, so it would expire. Or so the contract, so the collateral is locked into the token, of course, versus a like a legal contract. And it's what's interesting. So I think most safe, simple agreement for future equity. I think that those contracts would normally specify like a specific number of UMA tokens or bank tokens that would vest at a future date. This instead specifies that you're going to get, if it expires within the range that you set. So let's say we did bank token, we might do the range from like 2 cents to 15 cents. And so if in a year bank were to be trading at 15 cents, you might get, you would actually get fewer tokens, but you'd get 15 cents worth. Or if it expired at 2 cents, you'd get more tokens, but it would be $1 worth. If it expires outside of that range, then you would get, you'd actually get $1 worth of tokens at 2 cents. So even if it's trading at 1 cent, you would get $1 worth as though you bought it at 2 cents. And then the same is true above the range. So if it's trading at 20 cents, you'd get $1 worth bought at 15 cents. And so your yield would either be lower or higher than the yield you'd get inside that range. So anyway, it is similar to a safe. It just has a little bit of exposure above or below that range, and then it has yield if it's inside that range.
Yeah, makes sense.
Nice. Yeah, I think that clears it up. I guess I'm curious, like, who have you guys done this with, and like, what does that process look like? How long has it taken? I'm also curious to hear like I guess demand side for like investors? Has that been like super interesting? Has there been like any issues with like I guess filling out that allocation? Kind of just curious to hear like some case studies from projects that you guys have used the range token with.
The users of the range token that we've been kind of discussing with at the moment are a couple like teams. Fun fact, and I think this is quite ceremonious because we're chatting to the Bankless team, but the Shapeshift team are interested in the potential of using that for their DAOification. And it's quite funny because like the old CEO of Shapeshift was on a Bankless podcast like that launched I think a day or two ago. So that's actually something that's quite close to the Bankless team at the moment that they might be aware of. In terms of like a team that's done it already, the UMA team, practiced what we preached and did it ourselves, and we minted $2.5 million worth of, $2.6 million worth of the range token and sold it in our first round to just a group of investors that were interested in the token sale. And like that's one route that you can go down. The other route that you can go down is do it in a more DeFi native way and have it be bought and sold through maybe a liquidity pool or with your community. And like the selling mechanism is something that we haven't explored too much yet. And as more teams use the solution, we'll find more interesting ways on how to sell the range token. But in the first round of like what UMA did, we did it as like a proof of concept with investors. And if anyone's on the call that's actually interested in reading about like why UMA did that and how we did that and how we created these tokens, there's an article on our Medium that I would kind of suggest as a evening read for just like a summary of what UMA did.
Can you share the link for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good review, Chandler, of that. Yeah, I mean the range token is only like a month old, so right now we're in the proposal stage. A lot of interest. There's still a lot of opportunity for some trailblazing here and experimentation from teams that launch range tokens. And what I mean is like how you sell them. You could put them on a V3 range liquidity range on Uniswap V3. You could do an auction. So you could like set the price, and that would setting the price determines the yield. And so if you do like 89 cents, that ends up being like I forget, like 11% yield or something like that. Or you could do an auction and let the market determine the yield. There's like really a lot of cool ways you can experiment with selling these things, and a lot of opportunities for teams to kind of like lead the way here. UMA happened to do ours like sort of through private sale. We actually only arranged $1 million of this to sell just for a proof of concept, but it got far oversubscribed. So investors are definitely interested in general, like people need to want to invest in your project, but I think we have been able to prove out that investors have an appetite for this kind of risk and trust this design as well. But yeah, I want to make sure. Yeah, go ahead, Lucas.
I was gonna ask, like, what is the worst case scenario for the DAO if you like issued a range token?
Sure. The worst case scenario is that your token expires at or below the range that you've specified. So imagine you basically put the range for bank token at 2 cents up to 15 cents. So you would have to collateralize that token with 50 range tokens, and you might only pay out a small portion of those if it expires at 15 cents or higher. But if when the token expires, it's less than 2 cents, you would end up paying out all 50 for each range token holder. So it caps the downside, but that is the maximum downside is just that, so that you would sell these and you'd have to pay out of your treasury 50 tokens per range token that you sold.
Okay, so like the worst case scenario is like at maturity, you just have to like distribute all the tokens that you locked up, pretty much.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so you choose that. Basically, it gives you the control that worst case scenario because you choose that range when you sell it.
There was some
I think there's
also
also
some.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add, there's like another way of looking at worst case scenario too, where if you're above the range, you're paying out a greater dollar value than what you had specified within the range. But presumably in that case, you're pretty happy because that means that your token is worth a good amount more, most likely.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. Ari?
There was also some feedback from the investors when Hart kind of proposed the range token about how they preferred equity rather than lending and yield. So UMA went ahead and, based on their feedback, created the success token, which is a complementary token, a token with an embedded call option, just as an alternative.
Yeah. So that's more of a model where the DAO is like selling tokens versus this lending against tokens thing. And so it depends on what the investors want and what serves the DAO the best.
And that just provides more upside for the investors.
Yep. Provides more upside, and also it's effectively a vested token. So I mean, when you as a DAO, when you create the success tokens, you lock them into the contract, you mint the success tokens, and then the investors receive those. There could be a liquid market for those tokens, but they won't actually be unlocked until the expiry date, and so it will delay that sell pressure on the primary market. Vari, I know that we're coming up on the end of an hour, and we got sort of in the details on the tokens, which I always love. Like, I don't want this to be a show fest by any means, but I always love an opportunity to talk about what we're up to. But I want to check in administratively. Like, I know we have this quiz coming up, and have we covered the content that will be asked in the quiz? Is that part of the purpose of this call? This is for you, Vari, but you're muted.
I believe. Oh, there we go.
The quiz is actually on KPI options, but in the text chat, I'll put in the crib sheets for the questions that will be asked. So if people would like to have a little look at them before we run the quiz, that would be super.
I'll throw out the POAP code. I guess my Canadian accent is causing some chaos. It's bank with UMA. With is in together. So just the two orgs, bank and UMA, and then WITH in between, no spaces or dashes or anything, and all lowercase for those who keep missing it.
Yeah, I'm also glad you mentioned the KPI tokens, because that's another really interesting use case. So right now we have a grants committee that's looking to fund projects on a milestone by milestone basis. So I think there's potential to use KPI tokens. I'm not sure if it would be immediately, but it could be worth exploring, just because it might automate some of that process. One thing might be we just launched the bet index this week. So maybe there's a KPI token for that squad that's leading that integration to scale it to a $50 million market cap or something like that. That's another potential use case that we could collaborate on, but that's super high level and early right now. But thought I'd put it on the table.
I think judging just by the way that this conversation went and the interest around the tokens, our next follow-up call, maybe we should just centrate around that, have that as our pillar, and just get to know the different token options and what's going on a little bit better.
Yeah, certainly if there's interest in that. I'm sensitive to making sure that we're not just pitching at Bankless. I want to make sure that it's something the community wants, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in those tokens, though, just in what they can provide for the DAO. but definitely interested in like trying to explore that more and potentially doing like at least like a proof of concept on one of them within the DAO would be like really interesting.
Yeah, that would be awesome. We have like, I don't know how quickly you guys want to move on this, but we could sort of do a campaign in your direction next week, potentially, if we wanted to, or we can wait for kind of signal us.
If we want a sandbox to play in, we could use BizDev as the guinea pig and see if that helps get BizDev spun up and a little bit more structured over there. Might be a good first use case to test out. Or maybe a more established guild.
Just on that point, maybe it's worthwhile noting for anyone that isn't aware that UMA's whole like growth and biz dev strategy is tied to KPI options. We did a developer mining program a while back and have migrated it to a new version that's KPI options based. And actually, so like how we onboard new teams and like reward them for building on us is fundamentally like using these KPI option type payout structures.
Can I ask you guys, what did you get out from this?
Are you looking for the biggest takeaways? Is that what you're asking, Koros?
Yeah, I mean, what's like the business model? I mean, how do you make money with these tokens yourselves?
So you mean how does UMA benefit when another DAO uses them?
Exactly.
Gotcha. Vari, were you going to chime in?
No, it's fine. On you go.
Okay. Yeah, how does UMA make money? So there's two answers to that, although I don't know if everyone would give the same answer as I am, like everyone on the team. The first is basically like we want to build relationships. We want to have good demonstration that our products are like effective and desirable, I think is just kind of one of the general answers. But a more specific answer is actually built into UMA's value accrual with the token. Basically, like in order to secure value, our optimistic oracle requires that the value secured be less than half of the total market cap of the token. Otherwise, it will start to charge fees to the contracts that are using it. We're far away from that charging fees point, but essentially, total value locked in our contracts does lead to returns for token holders. But there's no, the takeaway for you is like there's no like fee associated with it. It's not like UMA takes 2% of the tokens you lock in these tokens or anything like that. It's all, yeah, there's no part of it like that.
Okay.
And if there's no last questions, we're just slightly over time. I'll give people a couple of minutes until say 6:35 and then start running the quiz in the Bankless channel. There's a couple of docs up there that you might want to take a little bit of a look at. This has been an excellent call. I've found out so much about how you started to organise your community and some really good advice there on tools to use, how to avoid burnout, how to get everybody up and going. And also I was really interested to hear about how you felt the whole shift was going at the minute with the general move towards introducing decentralized finance at beyond the individual level, at kind of DAO to DAO level. So it's been a great call, and thank you very much to everyone for turning up.